Hello, this is Charles Brewer, President of the Civil War Study Group here at Lake of the Woods, Virginia. Welcome to the recording of our Zoom presentation on wilderness crossing concerns, August 11th, 2022. Say good morning. I'm Charles Brewer, President of the Civil War Study Group here at Lake of the Woods. This morning's session is being recorded for our YouTube channel. We have been concerned for a while about the effects of the proposed wilderness crossing project. I'm going to share my screen briefly. The project relies upon rerouting of the intersection of routes 20 and Route 3, currently here near the sheets, right? Less than 1/4 of a mile westward. This is a change envisioned by Orange County's Orderly Growth Program, the Greater Wilderness Area Plan. When completed at some time in the future, this redirection will place more traffic closer to the Grant Meade headquarters site just south of the Sheet Station at the current Route 20 and 3 intersection. What does this change mean for future National Park Service historical interpretation efforts for the headquarters site? Does the expected added noise and air pollution affect the NPS decision-making in that regard? And since most of today's participants are residents of Lake of the Woods, this change would place the increased traffic noise and pollution within about 1,000 feet of the backyards of many of the residences on the Edgemont Lane cul-de-sac and the eastern side of Eastover Parkway near the Keaton Lake Dam. That apparently is going to happen sometime in the future. The introduction of wilderness crossing, I believe, just speeds up the process, since the wilderness crossing design has its main entrance at the proposed Route 20 and Route 3 intersection. Plus the volume of those effects will increase exponentially, given that especially the retail and commercial aspects of the development will become a regional magnet, a destination on many GPS devices of the future. With us today to provide information and insight are Bob Lookabill, President of Friends of the Wilderness Battlefield, and Don McCown, the Orange and Madison counties land use field representative on the Piedmont Environmental Council, which, by the way, is currently celebrating its 50th year of contributing to our region. Prior to joining PEC in January, Don served over 20 years in a variety of community service roles, including supervisor in Virginia's judicial system and AmeriCorps Program Director for Habitat for Humanity of North Carolina. Hailing from West Texas, Don has loved exploring rural Loudoun, Clark, and Albemarle counties, where he and his family have lived for 15 years. Don received his BA in sociology from the University of Oklahoma and his JD from Catholic University of America. Now I'll turn it over to Don and Bob.
Thank you, Charles, for the introduction, and thank you for having me today. I've been looking forward to speaking to your group for a while. So yeah, like Charles said, I'm with Piedmont Environmental Council, PEC, we go by. And so yeah, I work on land use issues in Orange and Madison counties, and land use issues really are those matters that that come before the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors, and these are things like zoning changes or new or different uses for existing zoning districts. So those are the things that I spend my time paying attention to. And let me share my screen now. Good place to start. Okay, here we go. Land use issues, and that's really what brings me here today to talk to your group. So PC's approach really is to engage and educate and empower citizens and residents to take an active role, participate in the process, in the local planning process, because it really is about our communities, and we want local residents to feel empowered and understand the process so that they feel that they have a voice and can participate. And so what I want to talk to you today is, like Charles said, is about what's going on with this proposal called Wilderness Crossing. And you recognize this map. I'm going to refer to the same one Charles used a lot today. But for those of you that don't know, this is a proposed mixed use development. Okay, and mixed use here means, and I'm gonna get that out of my way. There we go. Land development mixed use is how it's referred to in Orange County zoning ordinance. But what that really means is it's a mix of residential, commercial, office, light industrial, and office space. I think you all are probably pretty well oriented to where it's located. Route 3 right here, Route 20. This boundary right here is Wilderness Run. Can everybody see my cursor? Is that showing up?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So that's Wilderness Run on the east side of this property, and then up here on the north, it's bounded on the north by 2 miles of Rapidan River frontage. So historically, this was the site of the Woodville plantation, which many of you are probably familiar with. As well as several gold mines, which we're going to hear a lot more about here. And some of you who've been in the area for a while may remember this. This carved out piece right here, this wooded section, that is the site that was proposed for a Walmart location about 10 years ago. And it currently, so I won't go into that, that's old news, I guess, but that was obviously controversial, made national news. But not sure how many people are aware of this, but as of 2013, actually Walmart turned that over to the state. So the Commonwealth of Virginia now owns that parcel right there. It's in a historic easement. So this parcel is actually already permanently protected from any future development. So that was a positive outcome of that episode. But before I get to the current status of this rezoning proposal and PEC's concerns about it, Bob Lookabill is going to talk to us a little bit first about the brief history of gold mining in and around the battlefield and the Woodville area, and also to help us understand the relationship between Elwood and Woodville and the core battlefield, the relationship between those locations, and how a development like this, of this scale, just like Walmart would have, how it would impact the core battlefield, as well as the larger just the visitor experience, being at the gateway to the battlefield. So I think many of you know Bob already, but again, he's the president of Friends of Wilderness Battlefield. He's an historical interpreter at Elwood. And I wanted to mention this, Bob, just as an aside. One of my former colleagues at PEC, his name's Dan Holmes, and he really led PEC's efforts against the Walmart proposal. He, after that effort was kind of put to rest, he gave a lot of credit to Friends of Wilderness Battlefield for being the primary local voice in that effort, and for making really critical outreach to the Board of Supervisors. So Friends of Wilderness Battlefield, they are definitely experienced advocates for historical preservation in the area, and really an important part of the ongoing, efforts to protect the gateway to the battlefield. So, Bob, I will hand it over to you from here, and you can tell me if you need me to advance slides, and I'll do that.
Yeah, if you could just go ahead, Don, and put up your slide of the gold mines.
Okay. Yeah.
Per se, and then I'll just talk to that. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I will add quickly here before I start that piece of property that Don outlined there, that Walmart ceded to the state. We are the quote unquote sort of caretakers of that property, and some of my folks spend time over there, sort of trimming felled trees and trying to keep an eye on it and make sure that nobody comes in and they're dumping And in fact, we've allowed some scouts to utilize that property for camping and so on. So we actually, as we speak, are still involved with that piece of property. Okay, I would start off by saying that I am by no means an expert here. I would give that mantle to Mr. Bob Epp, who is on vacation this week, and we didn't want to interfere with Bob's relaxing time away. I'm certainly not a metallurgist or have any knowledge in that. That's why I was a history teacher. But I think that there are just some very basic concepts that we can talk about as we go through this, and then we'll circle back, I guess, at the end for questions. Don, is that or Charles? Yeah.
Right.
So I think many folks are surprised to learn that Virginia was one of the few top gold producing states prior to the discovery of gold in California. And basically what you had a gold pyrite belt, if you think of that in quotes, that stretched from Atlanta, Georgia, sort of roughly northeasterly, and it came to an end in Frederick County, Virginia, which is right on the Maryland Virginia border. So you can kind of get that strip sort of fixed in your mind. And that's where in the US at that, up to the discovery in California, that's where your gold was being produced. And Virginia was certainly, from what we can gather, they did not keep, you weren't required to keep any kind of real records. And so I've heard different people claim different states were the #1 producer, to include Virginia. I have no clue, but it was certainly one of the top three between Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia. And for Virginia, most of that gold mining was in a roughly 9 to 16 mile wide strip that extended from Fairfax County down to Buckingham County. And then locally, that zone would be along a line from Gold Vein, which is north of the Rappahannock, and stretch down to the city of Orange. And so when you look at where gold was discovered in our area right off of the Germanna Plank Road, that puts you almost dead center in that gold mining area. And that was in 1825. So the next thing we want to talk about is there were 3 basic types of mining that occurred in the wilderness. And the first type was pan or placer. And I think we can all get that mental image of the prospector out there shaking his gold pan. Then the second would be surface or strip mining, where a vein or the rock that you're going to take the gold out of is detectable along the surface. And then the third, of course, would be the deep shaft mining. And again, I think that folks are surprised. I was surprised to learn that vertical shafts on at least one of these mines stretched down 300 feet and others into the hundreds. So it was a major industrial operation out here, and one that I think generally very little is actually known about. So the ore is obviously removed from the ground, and there were shafts, which I think is one of the other interesting points about this whole operation, that went off of that main vertical shaft. And I think Don will speak to this later on, but I think some of those are not very well charted, if they're charted at all. But the ore at that point had to be crushed in order to get the gold out. And once the ore is crushed and the heavy machinery is used, then at that point they introduced mercury to separate the gold away from the ore. And that's where the problem comes in for us. And again, Don will talk more about that specifically later. But there were, again, fairly obviously no rules or regulations concerning the mercury. It was just sort of dumped on the ground, dumped into the streams, even more disturbing, I think. And we still have, obviously, if you noticed on the first graphic along the Rapidan River, there is a section that you're not supposed to eat the fish that come out of there because they have high levels of mercury. Thank you very much. And one final point on the just the general overall. There was some interesting innovation and machinery in use, particularly at the Vaucluse, which was the huge operation, which really was a mining community out there. And they had a large steam engine which powered the crushing equipment. And Henry Ford came along later on after the operations had ceased and purchased that equipment and had it shipped off to his museum in Detroit, Michigan. So pretty advanced for the time. So there are 5 mines, and if you look at your map here, that we would have some concern about. And again, vertical shafts, what are called subsurface drifts or channels that would come off of that main shaft. And there was and again, this is online. The zoning planning commission, I'm sorry, their site. If you go in, you'll find the gold mining information. And an outfit called Sullivan, Donahue, and Ingalls did a study, the outline approach strategy and on the gold mine coordination at the Wilderness Crossing development. And again, they list those same 5 areas as being within the property. In 1988, I'm sorry, there was a state study, and that's, Don, you may correct me here, but it's the energy, what's the phrase that I'm looking for? Anyway, they're the state agency that's in charge of mines, minerals, and energy.
Right.
And they did a study because there was actually some interest apparently in some companies actually starting some of these mines back, or putting some of these mines back into production. And so they came out and did a study, and they confirmed the significant mercury contamination at that point. And then in 2010, that's when that 10-mile stretch of the Rapidan along the edge of the property was declared impaired because of the levels of mercury in the fish, as I indicated previously. So why are we concerned as park or as Friends of the Wilderness or as concerned citizens of this? And as has been pointed out, I think if you go back and you look at at the Walmart, many of those arguments, hold sway here. What is it that we want the gateway to our national parks and our development, where we live? What do we want that to look like in 20 or 30 years? And my huge example of that, or my sort of my go-to, is if you look at Salem Church back down Route 3, and we had the chance at the time to protect that property, and the sense was that they're never going to develop out that far, and if they do, there'll be rules and regulations, and you can't find Salem Church today. I mean, it's there, you can find it, but it's hidden in behind the McDonald's and the and the car washes and all the rest of the various businesses along that area. And it's, you know, it's not pleasant, but, and again, I do not believe that, you know, that this is probably something that could be stopped completely. I think, but I do think that with our intervention, our interest, that we can try to modify this to better suit, you know, what we see as some sort of a vision. And the last thing I would throw out there, Don, and this is a little maybe far afield for me, but I did find that one paragraph in that report by the company for Wilderness Crossing that says, question 7 was, who is responsible for the reclamation cleanup of the mines? And basically their answer is, there is no assigned responsibility relative to the reclamation or cleanup. And certainly these mines that were opened in the mid 1800s, the landowner is not required to perform remediation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can read it. So while their position in this, and I'm probably stepping on your toes here a little bit, but you know, is that go ahead and rezone this and trust us, and then we'll take care of it. And I like I say, when you have the law on your side that says you're not responsible for it, then I would question that as a viable strategy. But that's it, and I'll kick it back over to Don.
Thank you, Bob. Let me ask you, before you go away too far, let me ask you one question, and it's a question that I've heard, and I think it's helpful for us to kind of get a response kind of developed in our minds. So what would you say to the person that says, well, this wasn't even part of the battlefield, so what does it matter?
Yeah, I think there are when you talk about the wilderness in general, and Elwood and the Jones family and the plantation, you know, William Jones probably owned and leased Woodville out here. So there's a direct, I think there's a direct connection here when we talk about the history of all of this. And when you look at the battlefield in particular, and I think you can certainly point to, if you're going to make the argument that the Walmart property was hallowed ground, which I think was pretty well made at the time. We know for a fact that the Woodville mine was a field hospital of some sort during the battle of Chancellorsville, the Confederates, and may well have been the Battle of the Wilderness for the Union forces. So yeah, I like I say, I think you can make a strong case that it's and again, you can define hallowed ground in a lot of ways, but my sense is when you bury a soldier there, that's a pretty significant, I don't care if it's 1 or 100, that makes that piece of property a little different than than anything around it. So yeah, there's lots of connections and lots of like I say, issues and concerns from our side of that.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Bob. That's a good answer. And I will say that is kind of that is something that those of us that have concerns about this project, that's something we're going to have to address, because it is for the uninformed or lay person, it does appear to be kind of outside of the protected area. But I'll get into a little bit of that in here in a minute. But so now that Bob has kind of put this site, the Wilderness Crossing site, in kind of some historical context for us and identified some of the historic resources in the immediate area, I want to talk now about kind of what are the current plans for Wilderness Crossing. So as some of you may have heard, so what we're talking about here actually is an application for rezoning, right? So this is a 2,600 acre property. It's currently zoned agricultural. And so when I talk about the developer or the applicant, the development or the proposal, all these are kind of interchangeable. So right now, how this exists is it's an application to the county to have this property rezoned, okay? And so you may have heard that this application expired in the spring, and that is correct, that's true, but now it's back active again. And you can find the current documents, the current application on the planning department's website, and Charles or I can share that link with you later if you're interested, but all this stuff is publicly available at this point. But here is the proposed land use for the property. And if you'll see here that there is current, so like I said, it's majority agricultural zoning right now. There's some, so this is oriented a little bit differently. You'll see north is going this way, but so here's Route 3 along here. Some of this is currently already zoned commercial, but the majority of it agriculture. And just as an aside, just so you all are aware, in Orange County, in the agricultural zoning district, a minimum lot size is 2 acres. And now there are some limitations depending on how it's subdivided, or if there's some, depending on the natural features actually of the actual site. But in general, if you have rural land in Orange County, it can be divided up into 2 acre lots. That's just kind of for some background. That's not, but that's the zoning that currently exists on this property. So what the developer has requested is that the county rezone this property to planned development mixed use, or PDM, and that would allow a mix. Obviously, from the name, it would allow a mix of residential, commercial, open space, some light industrial. Residential, it would allow for up to 6 to 12 residential units per acre. Okay, now, important point here, 6 to 12 units per acre, that's what that zoning ordinance allows for. However, to be fair, in the developer's application, he has limited himself to a max build out over, and this is a 40-year project, by the way, is a maximum of 6,500 residential units, which would put that on the low end of this 6 to 12 units per acre. So we're not talking about 12 units per acre. We're talking more around the 6 units per acre, with a maximum of 6,500 residential units. And those units would be located on 1,065 acres of this whole property, okay? Now, and so on this map here, which again, this is a map that's included in their application packet, which is available. These brown areas where you see my cursor, this would be the residential areas for the most part. There's some mixed town center, some commercial, but the brown areas would be residential and development, basically. Okay, so again, 6,500 residential units in those areas. Just to kind of give some perspective, so the recent census data shows that 2.58 people per household in Orange County. So 6,500 new units could support up to 16,770 people. For comparison, 2021 census figures show that Orange County has 15,907 residential units currently across the whole county, with a population of 37,188. So 6,500 units up to 16,000, new residents, that could be quite an impact. Now, again, to be fair, this is, projected over 40 years, but it is our concern, belief at PC that many of this number would be essentially recruited growth. I haven't dived in too deeply to the census data yet, but I believe that this would be an increase above and beyond any kind of natural just expected population growth for the county. So, but that's sort of a sense of the size and the scale that we're talking about. So what are our concerns at PEC, and what are we wanting to kind of inform people about? We have a number of those, and I'm going to share under the big heading, kind of just concerns about the size and scale. There are a number of kind of subheadings, I guess you could say, or related concerns. And so let me go back to so regarding the size and scale, one concern is something I think that Charles already touched on in the introduction, and that's traffic. You know, those of you that live in the area are up and down, I'm sure, Route 3 often, and you probably know, you know, it really serves as a corridor, right? It's not just a local use road. It's, you know, Culpeper up here is really growing and expanding, and obviously Fredericksburg is constantly growing and expanding. And this is a corridor, you know, it's a connection over to 95 to the 95 corridor. So this is a heavily traffic route that's not just for local residents, obviously, right? So anytime there's a rezoning or development project, the applicant has to do a traffic impact analysis, and in this case, the applicant has provided that, and I'm still in the process of reviewing it. But one takeaway is that by 2026, it's expected that this development at the build out that might exist at 2026, so maybe not at maximum build out, but what the situation we'd have at 2026 if things go according to kind of the plan or the projections, there'd be an increased traffic of 18,573 new daily trips, vehicle trips a day on this corridor along here, Route 3. So again, you all drive that route regularly, so you can maybe use your imagination to see what kind of impact that would be. But it would be an impact. I wanted to speak to this realignment that Charles touched on first thing. That is still kind of unclear. That there is mention of that, I think, in the county's kind of growth plan for this area. But just in the last several months, VDOT has put forward a plan to, rather than realign Route 20, to just upgrades to this intersection here. And likewise, the developer in the application does not call for this in so many words. They do propose some additional lanes maybe, or different configuration at this intersection. So while that has definitely been floated in the past, and it's something that I'll kind of continue to watch for and monitor, because that would be a significant impact. Like Charles said, it cuts through, you know, protected area for one. I can't say definitively that that is still on the table, that there's just some other plans that have been mentioned and floated that seem to be kind of rising to the top, if you will. So stay tuned for that. But to be fair, that may or may not be still in the cards. But anyway, traffic impact, definitely a concern, increased traffic. And when a developer does one of these traffic impact analysis, I do want to point out that is just, again, that's not, that number is not just from natural increased new residents to the area. When they do those analysis, it's based on, if this project were to exist, what impact would this project have on traffic? Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that. So again, by 2026, they were saying an additional 18,000 vehicle trips per day. So similarly, another concern that has to do just with the size and scale of the project is what we call cost of services or cost of community services. And really that's getting at taxes. So if there are an additional, 6,500 residential units in the community, obviously those new residents require community services, water, sewer, school, public safety, et cetera. And we're still analyzing that data. So I can't speak definitively yet on the impact that this might have on, I can't give you an actual number, but I will say that study after study across the country, in Virginia as well as other states, have shown that residential development just doesn't pay for itself in the long term. Now, again, this is a mixed use, to be fair, so this is not all residential, but it is primarily a residential development. And the evidence is in other situations like this, that even though there's an initial influx of property taxes for all the new homes, over the life of a community like this, the infrastructure costs eventually outpace the revenue coming in from property taxes. You know, roads, sewer, water, schools, they all require maintenance and repairs or replacement. And eventually those costs do outweigh the revenue from property taxes. And again, I can share, there's an organization that specializes in that kind of study, and I can share that with Charles and he can send you that information. But that's something we're looking at closely. And again, I haven't analyzed the data for this project yet, but that is something we're concerned about. And then finally, on the kind of under the heading of just the size and scale of this thing, anytime we're dealing with the rezoning of this size, we have to pay attention to the sort of possibility of what we would call speculative development. And the idea here is that, you know, a developer has a piece of property with limited zoning. So in this case, you know, agricultural zoning, but then gets it rezoned with more development rights. Often, you know, presenting a plan with pictures and studies and touting, you know, lots of benefits to the community, but gets it rezoned. And then sometime after that sells it at a profit because now it's more valuable because it has more development rights. Now, I'm not suggesting that this applicant or this developer has that in mind or has that plan, but that has happened elsewhere. And there's nothing in the application or the rezoning process that binds the applicant to, you know, we will break ground within X number of days or X number of months from, you know, the rezoning. There are no guarantees. So again, not suggesting anything that that's what is in mind here, but anytime there's a situation like this, that is a possibility. And what would happen then is now there's this large piece of property that is zoned for more development, and a buyer who might come along can propose to do something different, maybe than what the community was, you know, sold on. It could be something that we like even less. So that is a possibility. So that's just something that at PC we have to kind of pay attention to. So that those are our kind of concerns having to do just with the type of development and the size of it. Separately, Bob really gave a great overview of our concerns just about basically the toxic legacy left behind from these historic gold mines. Again, Bob mentioned there's documented evidence that these sites, there is mercury on site. It's unmitigated, and we know the source. I think I'll share a few just sort of some documentation there. This is from 1988, city of Fredericksburg. City is very concerned about this contamination and references samples from the Wilderness Run area. They are concerned about concentrations of mercury in streams tributary to the Rappahannock. Okay, so city of Fredericksburg was concerned about this. This was, again, I think Bob referenced a report. Used to be the Department of Mines, Minerals and Energy. Now they're just called Virginia Energy. But this is a report from, again, 1988. This inspector suggested that the Vaucluse complex of mines may be investigated for inclusion in the Superfund site based on the mercury contamination in that area. Still again, 1990, this is State Water Control Board talking about specifically about the Vaucluse it's this paragraph here, remain concerned about the elevated levels of mercury in the stream sediments at Vaucluse, possible impact of mercury fish tissue levels, concerned about any site disturbance that would render the mercury more available in the aquatic ecosystem. Okay, so this is again going back to 1990. Finally, this is the documentation that Bob touched on about the fish consumption, that this stretch of the Rapidan, you can see here it starts at the confluence of Flat Run, goes down to Wilderness Run, then from Wilderness Run onto Middle Run. So this is the stretch that that borders Wilderness Crossing, and this is current. This is from 2020. This is still an active classification, but mercury in fish tissue. So the state is aware of that and has classified that stretch of the river as impaired. So despite these, despite the fact that this is well documented, long-standing concerns about mercury contamination, so far nothing has been done to reclaim these sites or to even mitigate the harm. And in our view, this, is resulting in ongoing harm until something is done. If you look at, Bob laid out kind of this gold pyrite belt, and in the immediate area, it kind of runs along this line here. And if you see, the mines aren't marked on this map, but this is again the proposal for the Wilderness Crossing. Again, it's oriented now slightly differently, but that belt runs right through the middle. Those mines are along kind of a band right in the middle, through some residential areas. There's a proposed school site there. There's a water reservoir there. So it's of these five or so main named mines that we're aware of, it's our understanding that only one shaft has been reclaimed, and that was one associated, I think, with Melville. It's been maybe a shaft was filled in with rubble and debris. But the most concerning, and again, to go back to this map, the Vaucluse, kind of right in the middle of this property, kind of right in the heart of this Wilderness Crossing area. That's kind of the most concerning site, because there is, according to, the Virginia Energy Inspector from the 80s and 90s, there's a tailings pit 60 feet deep, located in the middle of a tributary of Shotgun Branch, which is along here somewhere, and is likely a source of contamination in Wilderness Run, ultimately the Rapidan and the Rappahannock. So there is a big tailings pit that has been identified that is leaching mercury into the ground, in the water. It's in a waterway, and it is going directly from Shotgun Branch into Wilderness Run into the Rapidan. And so again, this is our concern. We just feel that, existing residents as well as future residents, need to be aware of this, and county and or state agencies need to address these issues. And in our view, this should happen before a rezoning. I think Bob mentioned that too. The developer right now does have a plan, to mitigate. They're not denying that this exists, and they are offering a proposed kind of plan to do some mitigation, but their proposal is contingent on getting the rezoning approved. And in our view, that kind of puts the cart before the horse with something that's kind of a public health issue like this one. We would like to see it mitigated and addressed before the rezoning goes forward. So, and finally, though, to kind of bring us back full circle, and what prompted me to reach out to Charles and to look for an opportunity to speak to your group is what we've already touched on a little bit too, is that we're talking here about the gateway to the battlefield, to hallowed ground. If you see on this map, here's 3. This isn't the clearest map, but 20 and 3. This is Wilderness Run right here. So the property's right there, literally at the entrance, gateway to the battlefield. These groups over here have formed a coalition of organizations and are working together to engage the county and to address these concerns that we've been talking about. And here is what they have said to the county in correspondence about this development. Wilderness Crossing would distinctly impact one of the most historically significant battlefields in the nation. The Congressional Civil War Sites Advisory Commission classified Wilderness Battlefield as a Priority 1 Class A site. That's the commission's highest designation. Okay, so for some of you, you may remember this if you lived in the area for a while, but in 2012, there was a gateway study done. And if you remember that process or know anything about that process, one of the findings was that this Wilderness Crossing property would be an appropriate place for a housing development. What the Gateway study found, now again, the Gateway study was just a group of concerned organizations. This was not sponsored by the county. This is a private, privately funded effort. But the Gateway study found that site would be appropriate for a gateway and entrance community to the protected area. However, nothing of the size or scope that Wilderness Crossing is contemplating, nothing like that was contemplated in the Wilderness Gateway study. And really what this study focused on, and again, there's the link, you can read it, it's got a lot of great background information, but it was focused on, this is hallowed ground. This is it's the gateway not only to Wilderness Battlefield, but as part of this larger complex, from Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Spotsylvania. It's, part of a larger protected area, historic area, and as well as an entrance to Orange County. It's kind of a front door to Orange County. So what do we want this area to look like? I think Bob posed that same question, and that is still the question today. We have an opportunity here to have, something special at the entrance to this area. What do we want, as a community, what do we want that area to look like? You think about, I know it's a national battlefield, but, it is part of the National Park Service. It's a unit of the National Park Service. Think about, visitors to a national park. When you enter, a gateway community for a national park, there's a sense that you're entering, a special place that is a place distinct and different and special in a way from the surrounding area. And that's kind of what we're hoping will take root here, is that this is a special location, and we want that to be apparent to visitors as well as residents. Let me go back. So this is the the green on this map obviously is the currently protected area. There are, and so this is kind of to my question that I posed to Bob earlier. It's like, well, Wilderness Crossing, it's outside the battlefield. So why is this really relevant? Why are we worried about it? Well, when the congressional study was identifying these important sites around the country, around the Civil War area, they looked at, there's a study area and a core area, and you all may be aware of this, but when they classified these sites, and when Wilderness was classified at the highest classification, it was one of only 9 sites that received that Class A classification. These were the factors: decisive influence on a campaign, direct impact on the course of the war, retain good or fair integrity, and face high or moderate threats, and have more than 20% of the core area protected. So again, Wilderness Battlefield was only one of 9 sites that they studied that met all those criteria. In that study, again, they identified a core area and a study area. Okay, not to get too into the weeds, but I think this is relevant. The study area on this map is what's in blue. Okay, the green area is the core battlefield area. So you can see on this map, and this is one of our own, we've just in-house kind of put these layers on. But PC made this map, but you can see there is some overlap here. So the Wilderness Crossing properties in red, this dark red is the part of Wilderness Crossing that is actually in the study area when the Congressional Commission was studying these sites. And so what a study area is over here, I won't read it all to you, but historic and archaeological resources associated with the battle, including, logistics, some combat, command, communication, medical. Bob mentioned the location of a field hospital. So there is part of this, at least part of this proposed development would be actually in the part of the core the study area of the battlefield, which has been already identified as being significant. And you'll notice here, again, this little carve out is the proposed Walmart location. So again, it wasn't in the core battlefield area, but it was within the study area. And, again, that was a strong argument in that effort from 10 years ago. So to kind of sum up, what kind of, I guess, think of next steps, or how do I get involved, or what's the next step? So this is what I would encourage anybody that is taking an interest in this issue. Here's what I would encourage you to do. One is read the application. And again, it's available on the county's website and the planning department website. And again, Charles and I can share those links later. Talk to your neighbors, make sure people know about that this is happening, that this is going on. I'd love for you to sign up for our email alerts, because as soon as anything changes or there are any updates, I'll be sending out, an email. That's probably the fastest way to get the information. We do expect there to be at least one town hall meeting, possibly not in August, but more likely in September. So I would encourage you to attend that meeting. We'll make sure everybody knows when and where that's happening. Contact your county supervisor and or your appointed county, your planning commissioner. Ask if you have questions about this project, direct your questions to them. Let them know that you're concerned about this, or that you have any concerns. And then finally, there will be a public hearing, and that actually is tentatively scheduled for October 6th. That would be before the Planning Commission, and they will take public input at that meeting as well as beforehand. So what I would recommend, if you are interested in contacting the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisor, personal emails, calls, phone calls, or letters are probably the most impactful. But PC, we're happy to help kind of make those contacts and provide, any background information. But personally contacting those officials really does, I think, carry some weight, and as does showing up at the public hearing, which again, October 6th will be the first that's tentatively scheduled, but we're expecting that on October 6th, and speaking your views at that. And here are some links that again, Charles and I can share those with you in a separate email. But that is all I have. I think I kept it under time.
Yes.
Ooh, a little over maybe, but happy to take any questions now, or people can contact me.
Yes, Don, can you unshare your screen, please?
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Okay, we do have a question.
See a question in the chat.
Are there two separate issues here, or are they one and the same, rerouting of Route 20 and wilderness crossing development?
Yeah, good question. To clarify, so the answer is just yes and no, I guess. My understanding is that rerouting of Route 20 has been floated for a long time, but has never really as one option, I guess, not related to development of wilderness crossing. But like I mentioned, the most recent, and this is just within the last couple of months, VDOT's current sort of position on that is they have put forward a plan to just reconfigure the current intersection. So VDOT, to my understanding, is not currently considering realigning Route 20.
That's good news as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Now, again, that's my understanding. VDOT thinks in terms of 6-year plans and 20-year plans, but in terms of the 6-year plan, I guess is what I'm speaking to. The current version of their 6-year plan does not contemplate rerouting Route 20, but rather investing quite a bit actually in reconfiguring that intersection, which made me feel like, well, maybe that's off the table. So,
All right.
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, with that, then I certainly appreciate Don and Bob's presentation, and I think we all need to stay informed about this issue, and then certainly, as Don indicates, read as much of the application as you can to inform yourself. It's pretty, detailed, et cetera, but they usually have executive summaries at the beginning, and then you can float through the pages to see some of the information for yourself. So I will be posting the recording of this session on our YouTube channel later, probably in the next few days, so that you can either watch it again or else encourage others to do so. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and everybody for participating. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Charles.
Before you go, please remember to visit our website often, civilwarstudygroup.org. We make every attempt on a regular basis to provide informative content. Thank you for visiting, and God bless.